Welcome to today's webinar titled A Researcher's Guide to Preprints, Importance and Benefits to Authors, conducted in collaboration with the Company of Biologists, a not-for-profit publisher supporting and inspiring the biology community. This insightful webinar will help researchers understand the importance and benefits of preprints in academia. Today we have with us Dr. Douglas Darnowski and Máté Pálfy, who will conduct this informative session. Dr. Darnowski is a highly published researcher with extensive experience in publishing books, book chapters, research papers, review articles, book reviews, and teaching materials such as textbooks, instruction manuals, etc. Dr. Darnowski has over 20 years of experience in the editing of scientific papers for peer-reviewed journals and is also associated with the editorial boards of Carnivorous Plant Newsletter and International Trigger Plant Society. In today's session, he will help attendees improve their understanding of preprint servers and also provide insights on how preprints can help in bridging the gaps in academic publishing. Dr. Máté Pálfy is the Community Manager for Prelights, a preprint highlighting service that was launched in 2018 by the Company of Biologists. His current role involves running the platform, building an early career research community, and providing writing or editing feedback. He is also a part of an international working group consisting of practitioners in preprint services and publishing operations to promote the adoption of preprints. In today's session, Dr. Pálfy will introduce Prelights to the researchers and how it can help in navigating the preprint literature. We welcome you both and thank you for joining us today. Before I hand over the mic to Dr. Darnowski, I'd like to give you all a brief introduction about Enago. We are the world's leading author services provider, and our author-first, quality-first approach ensures that our authors only receive the best quality output and excellent user experience at all times. This unrelenting focus on authors' needs means that we never compromise on our quality systems and processes at any cost. All our services are designed keeping in mind the author's needs. Enago Academy is an author training platform that educates authors through a number of resources, including webinars, as well as live workshop sessions. We also have an e-learning platform for researchers called Enago Learn, along with a live one-on-one consultation platform called as Enago Consult. Enago offers world-class services to researchers at different stages of their research career, such as two-editor system English language editing service, academic and non-academic translation service, manuscript preparation service, and publication support service. The Enago promise guarantees that a manuscript edited by us will never be rejected on the basis of poor language. On a rare occasion, if rejection occurs, we will take full responsibility for re-editing the paper for resubmission at no additional cost. Enago's comprehensive after-sales services will support you at every step of the way until your manuscript is published. They are designed to take care of every need from the time you receive our main services until you are published. Enago's research communication services are designed to help you effectively present your research data. In case you are interested to know more about any of these services, please feel free to email to us at academy@enago.com. Now, without any further delay, I hand over the mic to Dr. Darnowski.
Alrighty, so we want to talk about preprints, and of course the big pressure when you are at any stage in your career, but especially early on in your career in sciences, you want to get your research published, and you'd like to publish it certainly in as prominent of a journal as you could, but you definitely want to get it out there somehow. And so there's lots of things out there where people make jokes about this, and of course there are lots of jokes where people are talking about, you know, how they're worried about publishing. And preprints are a growing opportunity, a growing area where you can help yourself, at least potentially. There are positive things. There are also pitfalls. And if anyone's been watching very closely the science in the news about the coronavirus, you've probably seen there have been a number of preprints featured prominently in science discussions online, some of which had to be withdrawn in the end. So there are pluses and there are minuses, and that's what we're gonna want to talk about. So there are different ways that you can think about submitting, okay? There are both subscription journals, ones where someone has to pay for it, whether it's some individuals will pay for subscription journals, but more commonly we get them through the institutions we work for. And then there are also open access journals, journals which will publish papers openly. They have a different model so that they can work economically. More often there may be more in the way of fees per page or something like that. You will, of course, go through peer review, and then you have to pay some sort of an article processing charge. It may have another name, but that can be a significant amount of money. And then the paper is available to anyone online. In contrast, for the subscription journals, after your peer review, which is going to work similarly, then you can oftentimes put that manuscript someplace in some sort of repository. You're probably also given a PDF copy, and we have all probably received some of those either directly from authors or through some sort of service like ResearchGate Online. And there may be some open access eventually, depending on the publisher, but the publisher in either case has to make some money. They have to pay their employees, they have to pay for the journal, especially if there's some actual physically printed copies, not just copies online. So there will be some open access, but it's not the same as the gold version. And there can also be hybrids sort of in between these two models, where you have some payment from you. There's immediate open access, but it's not exactly working exactly the same way. So what is a preprint? A preprint is something that looks like a scientific manuscript, like you would get in a peer-reviewed journal after it's been peer-reviewed, after it's published, and it's supposed to be complete. And in fact, in some cases, and this has gone back and forth over time, it may be archived for you and allowed for people to look at it by the same journal that will publish it officially afterwards. That varies. So how the preprints and the preprint servers where preprints are put online for access varies, okay? So if you go out there and you put your manuscript up there, you send it to a journal, the journal will have an editor who will run the paper through several peer reviewers. How many will depend on the journal, and it can take a long time to get your work out there. It can take months in the best of cases, and it may take years, especially if several revisions are required, if you have multiple co-authors, if it's a popular journal, if it's rejected and you have to go from one journal to another, right? And especially if you're early in your career, this can be a problem. You want to get your career going, you want to move on. And so the preprint option is a lot quicker. All right. So by putting your manuscript on a preprint server, it's available very quickly, and it looks like a scientific paper. It's in the format of a peer-reviewed paper. It is a paper, even if it's not yet peer-reviewed. That manuscript then can be, at least more and more today, and if you have the right journal, can go to the journal and the editor and the peer reviewers and take a while to be published. But at least if you go through a preprint, it allows you to show to the world and to potential employers, if you move on in your career, what you can do and where your research has progressed, right? Preprints can give you that kind of credit and maybe even official credit. Preprints can be cited, and it can also give you feedback. In some cases, historically and today, some journals are willing to accept feedback on the preprint towards peer review. So there may be advantages to this whole process of using preprints. And there are lots of servers out there, and you can Google the names of any of these and you'll find out lots about them. Many of them contain thousands, tens of thousands or more articles out there for people to be able to take a look at. So historically, how do things go with preprints? Well, there's a short video here from Anego.
A scientist's job is to obtain knowledge about the natural world. Sharing that knowledge is critical for scientific progress, as new information produced by one scientist can be used by others to make new discoveries and further benefit society. In 1665, the Royal Society of London created the first scientific journal called Philosophical Transactions to facilitate the transmission of new scientific findings. This publishing model established the concept of peer review to ensure scientific quality and the defined date of publication to establish priority of discovery. These principles have laid the foundation for the nearly 30,000 scientific journals that exist today. Let's see how the process works. First, scientists write a manuscript and send it to a journal for consideration. If the editors are interested, it is sent out to a group of anonymous scientists for their opinion on the quality of the work. The journal receives commentaries from the reviewers and decides whether to accept or reject the manuscript, or commonly requests revisions that require more experiments, resubmission, and re-review before the journal makes a final decision. This process works, but it takes time. It's not uncommon for studies to be published 1 year after initial submission. In addition, excellent work can be rejected on the basis of its perceived importance. Are there better ways biologists can share information? Biology may learn a thing or two from the physicists. In 1991, Paul Ginspar revolutionized communication among physicists by producing a preprint server called arXiv that allows for rapid communication among scientists. arXiv now posts more than 100,000 papers each year. Preprint servers in the life sciences exist, but they are not yet widely used. A preprint server is simple. A scientist uploads a manuscript to a server. The paper is screened to ensure its scientific nature. Within a few days, the manuscript is posted online and becomes visible to the entire scientific community before peer review. Subsequently, the manuscript is usually submitted to a traditional journal for peer review and publication. Most, but not all journals, will accept work previously posted on a preprint server. The immediate access of the preprint has many advantages. Preprint servers give the authors feedback from a larger group of people than the anonymous peer reviewers. Preprints can be an announcement of a discovery, which helps scientists establish priority of their work. With preprints, authors can share work in progress or recent accomplishments with funding agencies, promotion committees, or future employers. Preprints are open access. Anyone in the world with an internet connection can view the manuscript for free. Preprints accelerate scientific progress by speeding up access to new findings. The internet is continuing to redefine how people access information and create social networks. Using the internet, physicist Paul Ginspar tried the first truly new experiment in scientific communication since the creation of the Philosophical Transactions 350 years ago. As our lives go digital, many new ideas and experiments in scientific communication will facilitate access to data, changing how scientific work is evaluated and discussed, and pushing scientific innovation at an ever-accelerating rate. Let's see what the next 10 years will bring. This video was produced by Eureka Science and is brought to you by ASAP Bio.
Oops. Oops. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so here is, it's important also to go and define what open access is. It means basically anybody can get a hold of it for free, and that's going to happen on the internet. So you can get a hold of it, you can download it, you can copy it, you can send it to other people, print it, do whatever you need to do with this material. And this gets around the kinds of barriers out there that exist because of the very high cost of journals. I know that I am a biology professor. I have been one for 20 years, and I don't subscribe to any more but one professional journal myself, simply because of the cost of the darn things. And so there are other barriers as well to this, and this is one reason why preprints can form an useful and important thing in the future of biology. And again, this is supposed to be a complete version of things. This is supposed to be a scientific paper. It's supposed to look like one and have all of the different sections of a scientific paper, even if it hasn't yet been peer reviewed. And again, we all have pretty good familiarity with this, and if the preprint is eventually going to go to a particular journal, the journal may already have established rules how to put the preprint together, just the way it will have rules for how to put the manuscript together that hopefully will be peer reviewed and then published. And again, as they were saying, the very first preprint server came out of physics, and it was Ginsburg who did this at Cornell in Ithaca, New York, USA, which is a really beautiful place if you haven't been there. A lot of interesting things have come out of there, and it can cover these different domains. Okay, it came out of physics again, but notice that most of the fields here have a lot of math in them. So you may find that a particular preprint server like arXiv, just like journals have themes and they publish papers in certain areas, so too you may find that the preprint server emphasizes one or another general area, though it may cross boundaries of traditional fields. Physics and math, oftentimes you don't find them in the same peer-reviewed journal, but they both involve a lot of math and computation. And there are various other ones like bioRxiv, okay? And so again, this one's going to cover more biologically oriented things, but notice that a lot of the things here are more data intensive as well. In other words, this is not a preprint server that's going to cover electron microscopy probably, which is more visual. This is more a data-driven one. But we have a range of biological subfields represented there, okay? And that's coming from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, which most biologists are going to be familiar with. There on Long Island, New York, USA. They're the ones who published the 3-volume molecular biology recipe book that a lot of us have used at some point. So again, well-known, well-respected, lots and lots of papers out there, or preprints, I should say, excuse me. And so this whole sort of thing is growing, and it's growing significantly. And you can notice that it's really exploded in about the last 5 years or so. So this is something, again, if you're an early career researcher right now, it would really be a useful thing to jump on. Especially if you look early on in this chart, you'll see that 10 years ago, it's really arXiv, and you had to be more computational, more data heavy, more mathematical in biology, or nature itself. And let's face it, most of us don't get up to nature, and most of us don't even try there that often, but the number and kind of preprint servers has exploded, as I say, in the last 5 years or so. So this is a growing area that you might want to seriously consider. Also, a lot of times, many of us have small projects where we have data, but maybe we don't know how to quite to fit it into a paper, but we'd like to get it out there somehow. This might be another option from some of those smaller amounts of information to help, again, drive your career forward. Whoops, sorry. I froze up there for a second. Similarly, not only is it the number of servers out there and the number of papers going out there, but more and more senior authors, which says, the people who know the system of publishing in the biological sciences, more and more of them are trusting this preprint preprint system as well, because in part there have been safeguards so that someone's not going to get scooped and things like that that come along that are improving this whole preprint system. And again, here we see life sciences is still a small wedge here. It's that little orange bit. General natural sciences, which of course could include some biological things, is a big chunk. Social sciences have jumped on it significantly, and so have the engineers. But so there's been a lot of growth recently in life sciences, but there's an awful lot of room for growth further. Who's doing this? Well, it's not evenly distributed around the world. Notice that an awful lot of the papers are coming out of the European Union, okay? Or at least this graph is dedicated to that, but there are a lot of other people using this as well. But there's a lot of room for growth, especially in the life sciences. And again, this is showing you mostly engineering data. Sorry, I keep locking up for some reason. Biomedical, okay, because sometimes people are going to separate the two, but to look at them together, look at biomedical rather, excuse me, other than just straight biology. And again, this is growing widely as well. There's clearly bioRxiv is the dominant player here, but Research Square you can see is growing, and you'll be hearing soon from Máté about their exciting new service, which he is here to help you help yourself with your career as well. PubMed, of course, is another way of looking at open access information, and PubMed is been sort of the 900-pound gorilla in this area for biology and biomedicine, but the biomedical preprint area is growing very rapidly. Notice that it's vanishingly small. 5 years ago, you're talking about 99.7% of all of the free stuff out there being able to be gotten at through PubMed. Today it's 97%, and it's going to continue to grow rapidly. So this is something really worth paying attention to. Again, why would you want to do this sort of thing? Because visibility, especially if you're early in your career. And it will show your progress because it gives you a stamp, if you will, for your work. It gives you precedence. Again, you got to make sure that you pick a preprint server that will allow you to be sure you won't be scooped, because the last thing you want to do is, early in your career, say something early, have someone else steal it, and then you're stuck. In other words, you don't want to be harmed by going the preprint route. It also could be important more and more for going out and getting the grants that will help to drive your career forward. And this immediacy doesn't prevent you from publishing the data, generally speaking, in peer-reviewed papers, and you can even link and you can show progress and different parts of your research program. You can also quickly get feedback from other people, though you're going to have to filter that and pay attention to that, who is doing this, okay, since it's not the formal peer review process yet. And it will allow more people to see your work, and more biology especially is multidisciplinary, and the more people you can show your work to, the more help you can find, the more collaborations you can find, the better you can drive your career forward. It can help you getting at paywall journals, that is, articles that you need to see but which are behind a paywall. You'll get more citations, which can only help you, and it will also help in general the pace of science, hopefully, if we do this the right way. That is, if we pay attention and are responsible. What are some of the policies like out there among different journals and also among the folks who pay for research? Well, there are plenty of journals that support this, including some very prominent ones, like ones from Nature and PLOS, the Royal Society, which we heard about in the little history video. Again, the Royal Society was the first one in the UK to create a scientific journal now 350 or so years ago, and various other journals on there. Impressive ones, high up ones, but then also there are plenty of other journals beyond just these ones that support the preprint process. How does this going to work? What are some of the innovations that have come along? Well, you're going to have editors for the preprints, and if you then go to have the paper published by peer review, you'll deal with another set of editors probably. And they may actually go out and actively recruit from the preprint server. So in other words, if you use preprints, it may help you to get the paper published, because if the editor says, hey, I like that thing, let's ask them to publish here, or at least submit for peer review here, you're much more likely to eventually be accepted by a journal that asks you to send your paper to them. And again, it may help because comments on the preprint may get into the review process. You get an extra level of review, the preprint review, pre-review, or levels, maybe I should say. You'll have some protection against someone coming along and getting a hold of your work before it can be published. I know someone in the lab I graduated from at Cornell. He was a few years ahead of me, and he didn't publish as fast maybe as it would have helped him, and he ended up being scooped on a number of major discoveries in this way. Preprints would have helped him a lot, would have helped his career a lot. And again, there's a possibility, especially with the internet, with all the capacity in the internet for data, to link to different versions of things. We can see the evolution of scientific data and opinion perhaps more clearly if we work this whole thing carefully. And there may be discounts because, again, page charges are not trivial, and that can help you if you can get it more cheaply, just like it's better to buy bread and eggs more cheaply. I've got 10 kids. I appreciate that. I appreciate publishing papers more cheaply as well. Lots of sources of funding, such as the NIH in the United States and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and various other ones that you see listed here, may be, or are, excuse me, behind preprints. They will support this. They are friendly to this use in the research you're doing, paid for by them. Some examples of this, so for example, from FAST grants, they're even for the money that they're shelling out for work on COVID-19, they're saying you've got to go through preprint. So we're now seeing a shift where at one point it was, oh, I don't know if I want to use this. Now it's more acceptable. And then you move on to the point where they say you got to go to preprint servers. Same way with this Michael J. Fox Foundation from that American actor. What's the role of these things? Okay, well, first of all, this is a really complicated diagram, and so I'm not going to try to spend all of the remaining time Máté wants to talk to. But you can see that the interaction of preprints with the rest of scientific communication, open access, open science, even more informal kinds of communications, it has an important potential role for all of these parts of science, all of these ways that we communicate and interact with other scientists. It's important for your career. It's important for getting your data out there in an open kind of way. It makes the process more transparent if people can see this. And again, if you have protection so that you don't get scooped and lose all that hard work, but that's being built into the system. It's important preprints more and more for getting funding. It helps you get more feedback from a broader range of people in the community. If you've sent papers out for peer review, you know that sometimes you get a few very cranky people in your field who are senior who don't like the ideas that you want to present, and then you get stuck. You just can't get published. Well, this can help break that logjam. I remember a paper, how long ago was I trying to publish that? About 2 years ago, and it was a novel paper, and someone important in the field did not want this published because it did not agree with her ideas, and she was also an editor of an important journal. This kind of preprint system can help, again, break up that control, which can be really unjust. And again, anecdotally, I'm sure everyone knows stories about this kind of thing, people whose careers were hurt by powerful people who didn't like ideas that threatened them. This can be a good thing, this kind of innovation. Again, early career researchers, many of you listening, maybe all of you listening, are early career researchers. It helps get your name out there. It helps things move faster along so you can move on. You want to get on with your career. You don't want to just be stuck in one place for the rest of your life. Move faster with your training as well. Learn better research design quality, or maybe not necessarily learn it, but get input from other people in other fields related to yours who can help you get better research design going. publish when you don't have as much money, because open access can at least potentially be a lot cheaper than some traditional journals. Accelerate the pace of research as long as we pay attention to quality of research. You can also get practice as a reviewer. In early career, you may not have the option to be a reviewer, but you can go on a preprint server and get some experience in that, and that will help you for later on in your career. You can correct things ahead of time, catch things, so that when you eventually go to peer review, the review will be easier because you may have had 10 or 20 people look at the paper and help you work the bugs out of it ahead of time. You might be worried that you'll get scooped. Somebody else is going to get ahead of you because they'll see your data. That it will, and I'll tell you right now as I'm thinking about it, that's a concern historically for people, even with major journals. There are cases where you hear about very prominent journals where reviewers will take the paper, they will hold up the review, take 10 people in their lab, make them work on it, and steal essentially the data that way. I've heard of more than one case like that. So the worrying about being scooped because you're using preprints, well, yeah, people have historically worried about that at all levels in the scientific process, but there are safeguards built in now that we'll talk more about in a second. Also, people might worry, well, if I preprint this, I'm not going to be able to get this published. That, again, is not the case, and we've mentioned it, and we'll mention that again, how that is the case, how you're protected. And also, they may be worried, oh, if I put it out there, nobody's going to see it. Not the case. There are lots of people watching. Alrighty, so top line, traditional peer-reviewed publication. You're a scientist, you send out your manuscript, it's sent to the journal, the editor, it may be rejected, or you may be asked for major or minor revisions. It goes through peer review. It may go through multiple levels of peer review. I had a paper I published about 4 years ago on a project we're still working on with seaweeds, and it went through 3 rounds of peer review because the reviewers disagreed with it so much. I think it took a record amount of time for the particular journal I was publishing in to get through the peer review process because of this. Eventually it gets published, and it takes time, but notice the length of time with the preprint for people to get a look at your work much quicker. Now, you'll still then have the option to submit to a journal for peer review. So it's in some sense the best of all possible worlds. You get attention for what you're doing right away, and you can still get it out there, submitted to a journal and peer reviewed if you pay attention and use the right services for this. It can also even be disseminated, get in people's hands in Journal Club. And many of you probably participate, maybe all of you participate in a Journal Club. If you don't, what's a journal club? It's in a research lab in a university or in a company. The idea is everybody in a particular research group gets together, reads the same paper, and discusses it. I actually remember starting this kind of thing when I was an undergraduate, and I still talk about some of the papers I read in journal clubs as an undergraduate when I teach my classes today to my undergraduate students. Okay, so it's a valuable thing. Well, preprints can be used there as well, and especially if they're for open access. In some sense, it's kind of like preprints, a big journal club, because you get lots and lots of people giving you feedback, and you see the PhD comics down there. Advantage for Journal Club, hey, anybody can get a hold of this. You don't have to have a paid subscription, which again, depending on where you're working, what kind of institution or company you're working for, it may be prohibitively expensive. Preprints, you can get them for free. It's also going to be very current. Okay, you haven't had the peer review yet, but you'll still probably be able to find people's comments at the preprint server, excuse me. And so it's a very valuable tool in that way. So you might want, hey, why don't you go ahead and innovate? Say to your boss, hey, why can't we do some preprint stuff in our journal club next time? And also, this again gives you some experience in peer review while you're early in your career. It's accelerating your progress. Lots of people are using them, though again, the use varies. Now, of course, some of this is going to be skewed by how many people work in different areas geographically under location, how many people are at different stages in their careers or at different types of institutions. However, you can see here that industry is going to be underrepresented in this area of use compared to research at universities, simply because, well, maybe it needs more innovation there. And if you're working in industry, maybe this is something you can do to help yourself, help your career look better. A lot of people aren't happy with publishing in biology, and I mentioned some negative examples I've seen throughout my career. And even in the most prominent journals, frauds can get through. So the peer review process isn't perfect, and people have some problems with how it works today. It may not be working as well as it should, both in terms of people's data safety, but also in terms of what's allowed to get out there. There are some people, maybe the control of the system needs to be changed. Preprints, a lot of people like it, okay? A lot of people like it, though not as many people have done it as may have sent out a peer-reviewed articles. Maybe this is something you really want to look at, again, to help yourself in your career. People have these concerns, but more and more journals are willing to accept this route, or even support it directly themselves. A lot of people are okay with the idea that this gives you priority of discovery, which is darned important, excuse me, for your career. And more people would cite preprints. So this is a more and more accepted thing, this innovation that's coming along in biomedical and biological science publication, in research, how you get your data out there. Many people are still sitting on the fence. You could be an innovator. You could be ahead of time if you go ahead, pursue this area. And more people would be happy to do this if their priority of discovery was protected, which is more and more the case. If their funders were happy about this, and that's more and more the case. And if more biology journals accepted it, and that's more and more the case. So this seems really like the wave of the future. There are various ways of licensing out there in order to help you protect yourself. Now, there's a lot of data on here, and I've only got a couple minutes left, so I can hand it over to Máté. So I'm gonna, this presentation is recorded, so you can go back, you can watch this thing again online, you can freeze at this slide and read the thing through carefully, but there are a variety of licenses out there that can be used for your preprints to help protect you in different ways, depending on what you want, what the preprint server requires, what the particular journal you eventually hope to publish in requires. And again, there are policies for archiving and how it's available to, and all of those kinds of things. And you simply have to do your research and think ahead. Where do I want to publish this? And is this going to be acceptable? That is the particular preprint route I want to go with the journal I eventually want to go to. Just got to pay attention, do your research ahead of time. And again, if you're listening to this webcast, I'm sure you're a go-getter and you really want to do that, and you're going to go out and you're going to do your research and protect yourself. Where are we going with preprints? Okay, it's expanding. Okay, the kinds of data available on them, their use, their availability, their public profile is growing, and it's something that is going to continue to grow and to be more and more positive. Make sure you find ones that give you the protections we've been talking about, and more about that, I'm sure, from Máté in just a couple of minutes here. But this is going to do a lot of good things for you, okay? And there are all kinds of metrics out there that are being added to this. So it's a growing field. This is sort of the Wild West, if you will. And that's the time to get in on things, is early on, if you want them to really benefit you the most. If you want to buy Microsoft stock, or if you want to buy Amazon stock and make a lot of money on it, you buy it early on. Where are preprints going to go from here? Closer syncing with journals, improving costs to people, that is, lowering some of those costs, more and more integration with the workflow for publishers, and further improvements like the ones we were talking about on the last slide. So go on out, get yourself what you need to do to help yourself, make your life better for yourself and for the people you care about and are responsible for, because that's where we all want you to go. Thank you for listening to me, and I am now going to mute myself, and I think Máté will take.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for Enago for organizing this webinar and inviting me. So before I go and talk about Prelice, I first want to give just a really brief introduction about the company of biologists. So as Kriti mentioned, we are a not-for-profit publishing organization with a mission to support biologists and inspire advances in biology. So we have 5 journals: Development, Journal of Cell Science, Journal of Experimental Biology, Disease Models and Mechanisms, and Biology Open. And apart from publishing these 5 journals, we also, as a charity, give grants to support societies, also for conferences and to early career researchers. So you can go out and check. We have different kinds of traveling fellowships. And we also organize our own conferences and workshops. And we run different community sites, and one of them is Prelights, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're a forward-looking publisher, which is perhaps also reflected in the way we have responded to preprints. So from very early on, Douglas mentioned that bioRxiv launched in November 2013. So already in early 2014, our journals have made policies that allow authors to submit preprints. And we've also made it even easier for authors by integrating our journals with bioRxiv. So you have the bioRxiv to journal and journal to bioRxiv transfer, which means that when you submit your paper to bioRxiv, just with a simple click, you can transfer it to our journals. Or if you decide on first submitting to the journal, you can then get your manuscript transferred to bioRxiv at the same time. We've also recently participated in Review Commons. So I don't know if you've heard about Review Commons, but it's a platform for journal independent peer review. And it also provides authors with a refereed preprint. So Douglas showed these graphs to you. So I just want to again emphasize that really the rise in number of preprints has really been like nearly exponential, especially since the launch of bioRxiv in late 2013. But actually, if you look at the proportion of preprints compared to the whole biomedical literature, as you see, although it's growing, it's still only just around 3%. So there's still a lot of potential for this number of preprints to grow in the future. And this can pose some challenges to scientists, especially as readers. Like one of the challenges is how do you navigate this preprint literature? So it's already difficult to keep track of what's published in journals. But now with the growing amount of preprints, how can you stay on top of things? The second thing which Douglas also touched upon is a great benefit of preprints is that you can receive feedback from the whole community. But actually, it can also be really interesting for readers to see these comments if they're public. So if you read an article on bioRxiv and you see that some experts have commented on this, it can be really useful. But that being said, this is not happening that often. So there could be a lot more public commenting happening on preprints. So these were kind of the 2 main motivations for us to launch Prelights in 2018. So to help scientists navigate the preprint literature and to facilitate public commenting. So I just want to give a brief overview of Prelights on this slide. So really at the very heart of Prelights is a group of early career researchers, who we call the Prelighters. So at the moment we have over 200 prelighters on our team, and they look at these preprint servers like bioRxiv, and they select preprints which they find are interesting. And once they selected an interesting preprint, they write a digest of this preprint, and you can think of it as a news and views type of article for a preprint. And what's really cool, I think, in Prelights is that these early career researchers then ask questions to the authors and contact them and ask them to reply to these questions. And I've been really glad that over 40% of the Prelights posts do feature an author's response by the preprint authors. So this helps you to sometimes get more insight into the paper, sorry, the preprint. So here I'm just showing you an example of what such a Prelight post looks like. So it has the preprint information and the link to the preprint. Once a preprint that is prelighted gets published, we also automatically link to the journal publication. A key part of the prelight is that we have a short and engaging summary of the preprint, and this is also what gets tweeted. And as many of you know, especially people who are fans of preprints are often also on Twitter, and there's a lot of discussion happening on preprints on Twitter, and indeed we also get a lot of engagement through this type of social media. On the Prelight site, you can also see the profiles of these early career researchers and read more about what kind of thing they're studying and where they're based. So just as a normal news and views piece in a proper journal, these also have a bit of a background to the topic of the preprint. But I think what's then really important is that apart from just summarizing the key findings, we also can hear about the pre-writer's take on the work. So why was it an interesting study? How does it move the field forward? And in general, what the person liked about the preprint. And as I mentioned before, an important part is also the questions to the authors. So it's been really nice to see that in the author response, we actually very often get really detailed author responses. And we've even seen that authors, or they've even told us, the preprint authors, that they've revised their work based on the discussions that they've read in the pre-light, or based on the questions that the pre-lighter asked them. And we've even seen pre-light cited by the preprint authors in a journal. So there are some journals where you can actually see the all the peer review files. So basically the peer review reports. And here we've seen that one of the authors has actually referred back to the pre-light, saying that these questions have partly been answered in this pre-light. We've also recently started encouraging authors that once their work is published in a journal, and if their work has been pre-lighted, they come back to us and comment on what were the main changes that happened as a result of peer review. And I think this is a really interesting thing, and we're hoping to expand this in the future to help readers appreciate what actually happens during peer review, and open this kind of black box of peer review, and show what's the difference between the pre-printed paper and the final version of record. I saw there was a question about indexing of preprints, and maybe I already answered that. Europe PMC, which is like the European PubMed Central, does index preprints, and it is also now indexing these pre-lights posts. So if you do your literature search there, you can also look out whether a study has been pre-lighted. And we're also happy that bioRxiv indexes pre-lights posts. So when you're looking on preprints and you see this pre-lights icon, that means that it has been pre-lighted. So pre-lights is also evolving with a new feature. So last year we introduced something we call pre-list, which are curated preprint lists. And these come in two flavors. So a pre-lighter can either assemble a topic-specific preprint list. For example, this one is on CRISPR technology. Or, of course, these early career researchers attend many conferences, and it's quite can these list preprints at meetings. Now, of course, there's at this moment no meetings happening, but we're also making space for conferences. So finally, I want to come to what the pre-lights community has been doing with the sudden increase of COVID-19 related preprints. So this is a graph taken from Nick Fraser, showing the amount of preprints since the outbreak. So you can appreciate that basically in the last 3 months, there have been thousands and thousands of preprints related to COVID posted on various preprint servers. So initially, the pre-lighters actually started such a pre-list, but then, of course, with these thousands of preprints, it was just impossible to list all of them. And actually, also, preprint servers made their own list, a comprehensive list of COVID-related preprints. So the pre-lighters got together and thought what they could do, and they actually built a site that tracks landmark preprints in response to COVID-19. These are manually curated preprints, and they also contain really short, like 1-2 line summaries. And we really try to just capture the most important preprints related to the outbreak, this outbreak. And they're placed on a timeline of the outbreak, so you can see the different events during this pandemic in red. And we also made the decision to feature some controversial preprints in this outbreak. So Doug also mentioned that there are sometimes studies coming out in preprints about COVID-19 that might actually be harmful. And we thought we would also feature some of these, of course, also linking to all the discussions that debunk these preprints and show what are the caveats of these. So as I mentioned, you can find short summaries of these preprints, and we also have collected a bunch of different resources related to COVID-19 to help researchers, but also even just anyone in the public who's interested in learning more about these things. So I want to end my presentation on the slide and make a big shout out to the whole pre-ladder community, because it's really been amazing to work with them. They're really proactive, as you can see also just with this initiative to launch this new website. They're really big champions of preprints. They've been also giving talks at different conferences, and it's really just fun to meet up with them at different meetings. And they've also, for example, organized workshops on preprints, and they're really big champions of preprints. So I think I would like to end my talk there.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Darnowski and Dr. Máté Pálfy, for conducting an insightful session today. Our attendees have indeed gained a lot of critical information.